March Madness has begun. Free agent frenzy. There are comings and goings here at the Star in Frisco. We break it down next on the Blitz. And here we are for another edition of the Blitz, your Dallas Cowboys report. Bill Jones along with Kyle Youmans, and I feel like I should do my annual rite of spring right off the top, Kyle. I hold in my hand my bracket for the NCAA tournament, and what I normally do is just rip it up. But we got one more day of the second round of the tournament on Monday, and so maybe I'll just hold on.
Just wait for a little bit. Let it kind of settle, and it's a day later than usual, like you said, so you've got to let things kind of play out a little bit, Bill.
Kind of like free agency with the Cowboys. You got to let things play out a little bit, don't you, Kyle?
A little bit, and that seems like that's been the mentality for the Cowboys and Cowboys fans everywhere. A little frustrated with that. Maybe the favorite saying of Stephen Jones, where it's an every day a year type of business, player acquisition. Well, maybe it needs to be a more 24-hour business, at least this time of year.
All right, let's review the early hours of free agency, and we talk about the comings and goings. How about the goings to start things off? As you look at the list, Chido Awuzie, Andy Dalton. Of course, he's now the starting quarterback for the Chicago Bears. Cam Erving, LP, Ladouceur, Joe Thomas, Blake Bell, and Chris Jones. Let's start with Chido here as he gets a 3-year deal with the Cincinnati Bengals.
Yeah, nobody really surprised about this one. You knew there was going to be a casualty of the cap in terms of some of these free agents in the secondary. It was going to be either one of the corners in terms of Awuzie or Jordan Lewis. Jordan Lewis is the one they elected to bring back because, well, Chido went out and got some money. 3 years, $22 million in Cincinnati. He signed on the first day or agreed to terms on the first day that he possibly could. So good for Chido. He's going to have a lot of playing time. He's going to have a couple extra guys in that secondary around that Bengals defense that I know are going to help him grow as a player. He's a little bit overvalued, I think, in the open market more than he was here. He's a good player. He had a lot to grow on, but that's something that you could definitely look at moving forward. He'll be a force to be reckoned with in Cincinnati.
And, of course, a good athleticism. Only started 6 games due to injuries last year for the Cowboys. Let's move to the quarterback position. Intrigue about Dak Prescott's backup as Andy Dalton gets starter money in Chicago, a 1-year deal, $10 million. But more importantly, he was told by the Bears he is the starting quarterback. Nick Foles, the backup there. But they made a move for Russell Wilson. They just didn't have enough ammunition.
Yeah, I don't know how they didn't have enough ammunition when you looked at the deal that they tried to make with Seattle. However, Andy Dalton's a pretty solid plan. Right now, sure, he is the starter, but I think Chicago's not necessarily done looking in the quarterback market. But if you are Andy Dalton, the fact that you went from 1 year, $3 million here in Dallas to go and up that another $7 million next year and to have a potential to at least fight for a starting job. He may not ultimately end up being the starter, but the fact that he's going to fight and be a starter, I think, is enough for him to really feel good about that deal.
Let's flip it over to the defensive side of the football. Joe Thomas, it's an under-the-radar signing, 1 year, $2 million, but Joe Thomas is now a Houston Texan.
Yeah, and this is something that I know Cowboys fans are maybe not as upset about as I am, because I thought Joe Thomas would have been the perfect candidate to bring back on this defense. You look at the money, there's not a ton of money there. 1 year, $2 million. And I think the fact of him being that safety net at the linebacker spot was even more valuable than the money he's even being paid. So he goes down to Houston. He'll be a solid depth piece there with the Texans, maybe even see a little bit of starting playing time, more playing time than he did here. But I think with the uncertainty that you have around Jalen Smith and Leighton Vander Esch, he may be the biggest loss for the Cowboys so far in free agency.
It can play every linebacker position. Special teams, Cowboys making moves. LP Ladouceur, now age 40, 2 games shy of Jason Witten's all-time Cowboys record for games played. He's gone, as is Chris Jones, the punter.
Yeah, Ladouceur is more of a cap casualty than anything, just basically a way to cut costs. And they went out and they grabbed a deep snapper out of Los Angeles. We'll talk about him in the next segment, but I think it is one of those sad realities, I think, of the business that is the NFL. And in the case of Chris Jones, he's been here forever as well, but you went out and found Hunter Nicewander, who just played better than Chris Jones did in 2020. I think that was really the deciding factor when it came down to those two.
Well, and LP Ladouceur, a 16-year career with the Cowboys and practically perfect in his job over those 16 years. When we come back, who is staying and who are the new guys who are entering the door here at the Star? When we come back in just a moment here on the Blitz.
The Dallas Cowboys Blitz is brought to you by AT&T, the official 5G innovation partner of the Dallas Cowboys. And by the Dallas Cowboys Football Club. Tour AT&T Stadium, the home of the Dallas Cowboys. Tours are available daily. For details, visit attstadium.com/tours. This segment is brought to you by AT&T, the official 5G innovation partner of the Dallas Cowboys.
The Blitz, your Dallas Cowboys report continues now here at the Star in Frisco. Bill Jones along with Kyle Youmans. We kicked off the show talking about the big-name players who are leaving the Cowboys. How about the guys who are coming back? And some of the new faces that you'll be seeing on the field for the Dallas Cowboys in 2021. Well, here's your list of those coming back who were free agents and have re-signed with the Cowboys. Topped by Jordan Lewis, the special teamer C.J. Goodwin, Noah Brown coming back, Cedric Wilson, Antoine Woods, who were restricted free agents. And new faces, Jake McQuaid, the long snapper. He's replacing LP Ladouceur, Ty Nsekhe, and Brent Urban, as well as Terrell Basham and Carlos Watkins. How about we start with the familiar name? Jordan Lewis is coming back on a 3-year deal.
And really re-signing your own has always been a priority for the Dallas Cowboys, and they showed that again this year with Jordan Lewis. And just how we talked about in the first segment with Chido Awuzie leaving, you needed bodies in the secondary. And Jordan Lewis, I think, was probably the best corner last year, or at least the most consistent corner, health-wise, play-wise, and in the slot. He'll compete with Anthony Brown in that slot spot heading into 2021 as well. So he comes back with 3 years, $16 million on that deal. Then C.J. Goodwin, I like this signing as well because you talk about a special teams ace and someone who really takes pride in special teams. That's exactly what the West Virginia native does. And bringing him back on a 2-year deal allows you some stability with John Fossil and company in terms of that special teams unit and allows really to grow a little bit on that side of the football.
You know, and you look on the offensive side of the football, one position that outside of quarterback and perhaps running back with Zeke, wide receiver, when you've got Amari Cooper, when you've got Michael Gallup, when you've got CeeDee Lamb, but they're shoring up the depth there, keeping guys they're familiar with who have special teams value, Noah Brown and Cedric Wilson.
And this is bad news for everybody who wanted a wide receiver in the NFL draft for the Dallas Cowboys. But you're right, whenever you have the three-headed monster that you do with Lamb, Gallup, and Cooper, you don't necessarily need a whole lot behind that. And both Cedric Wilson and Noah Brown in 2020 showed that they're formidable. Not even just formidable, but good NFL receivers. You saw what what Cedric Wilson did in Seattle. He had a couple big-time receptions. Noah Brown was a first-down machine. Ultimately, bringing these two guys back on their tenders allows the Cowboys to have a lot of freedom whenever it comes to the NFL draft and free agency around the offensive side of the football.
All right, you know who has his hands all over the early days of free agency on this Cowboys coaching staff? That would be John Fossil.
Yes, he does.
With all the moves as far as special teams are concerned. Jake McQuaid is the new long snapper for this team. An interesting story is Ty Nsekhe out of Arlington Bowie High School, and we didn't talk about Cam Irving off the top, but he basically replaces Cam Irving on this roster.
Yeah, he does, and he's a veteran coming from the Bills, and coming back home, it's something to look at. And then I also want to talk about the depth on the defensive line. You bring in guys like Terrell Basham, who was a former draft target for the Cowboys back in 2017, and then Brent Urban, who, as a defensive tackle, he'll probably play more toward the 1 technique than the 3 technique, but he's a run stuffer, and that's a huge problem for the Cowboys to fix this offseason.
And Terrell Basham, who is a contender to get some snaps as an edge rusher on this team. All right, when we come back here on the Blitz, we turn our attention to the rest of the NFC East. Ryan Fitzpatrick, we're going to be seeing some of him in 2021.
This segment was brought to you by AT&T, the official 5G innovation partner of the Dallas Cowboys.
Welcome back to the Blitz, your Dallas Cowboys report. Bill Jones along with Kyle Youmans, and time to take a look around the NFC East and what the Cowboys' rivals have done in the early days of free agency. Let's look at the list of what the Giants, the football team, and the Eagles have done so far. And it's really the Giants and the football team who have done the most. You know, I got a trivia question, Kyle. You know, you look at Washington, and you could ask Cowboys fans who won the NFC East last year, and there's a lot of Cowboys fans. I have to sit here and think about, oh, yeah, Washington won the NFC East.
7-9. Cowboys fans turned off the television whenever they lost to New York.
We were
it was
out.
over. It was
we
done.
Were out. It doesn't matter who won the NFC East in 2020. We all want to forget about 2020. Let's turn our attention to 2021, and Ryan Fitzpatrick is the new quarterback of the Washington football team.
Yeah, and as a Cowboys fan, you hate this signing. As a Washington football fan or a football fan in general, you like this signing because Ryan Fitzpatrick is the perfect bridge quarterback to a franchise quarterback. He's been that way throughout his career, whether it was New York or whether it was Miami. He's found a way to be successful, and wide receivers love playing with him. And then you look at Curtis Samuel, who was a former college teammate with Terry McLaurin. Those Ohio State Buckeyes are going to be lining up opposite of each other for Ryan Fitzpatrick to throw the football to. That's what Washington was missing last year when they won the division. They were 7-9, but they needed a quarterback to really get to the next level. Ryan Fitzpatrick certainly could be that.
Yeah, and Curtis Samuel, they can use him running the football as well as obviously in the passing game, and that coaching staff very familiar with him, their time in Carolina. And so Curtis Samuel, I think that's the biggest pickup by really, I think, of all the NFC East teams. Let's look at what the Giants have done. One of the key things they did was keep one of their own, Leonard Williams, on their defensive line. And the other thing that I think that Jason Garrett loves, you can see his fingerprints on this signing. Kyle Rudolph comes over from the Minnesota Vikings, and I think Garrett probably looks at him as, I got my Jason Witten in my offense now.
Yeah, and maybe it's just because he wore the number 82 in Minnesota, but he was a cap casualty for the Vikings. They would have loved to have him around. He's not as productive as he once was, at least early in his career, but he's still going to be somebody that you can put opposite of Evan Ingram and allow those two to kind of be that tight end duo. And then you talked about Williams. They know what they're getting from Leonard Williams in the middle of that defensive line. Ever since he came over from New York, he's been the concrete. He's been the anchor of that defensive line, and they're definitely happy to have him back.
And they signed a backup quarterback. Mike Glennon
there you go.
Is now their backup quarterback to Daniel Jones in New York. And how about what Philly has done? Well, they haven't done much in free agency, but they did a whole lot in the early days of the offseason, which was announced on Thursday as Carson Wentz has moved on to the Indianapolis Colts now.
Yeah, big trade early in the offseason. Since then, really not a whole lot of noise from Philadelphia, and they haven't had a ton of money to play with, I think, in free agency because of the dead money that was from Carson Wentz's contract. The majority of their improvement is going to come from the NFL draft, whether they go with a wide receiver, whether they go with a quarterback, because wherever Jalen Hurts is going in 2021, he'll either have an extra weapon or a counterpart that he's going to have to compete against.
So Washington and Philadelphia both in the quarterback mix in the draft, I would think. All right, when we come back, speaking of the draft, I wonder if our draft expert and LSU alum, David Hellman, might talk about an LSU wide receiver in just a moment.
Just when you thought a wide receiver group couldn't get more talented than the 2020 class, the 2021 class has something to say about it. Welcome back in to the Blitz, the Dallas Cowboys report, as we inch closer to the 2021 NFL Draft. Kyle Youmans now joined by David Hellman, our DallasCowboys.com resident draft expert. I like to tab you as the resident draft expert, but I mentioned it already. Last year's class, the 2020 class of wide receivers, of course, the Cowboys went with a first-round wide receiver in CeeDee Lamb. You had Jerry Jeudy. You had Henry Ruggs III. But this class is just as deep, I think, from that wide receiver position.
I know, Kyle, and it's kind of a bummer, to be honest. I mean, look, I think we're all happy with the job that CeeDee Lamb did last year. Fantastic draft pick by the Cowboys. Obviously, they have one of the best receiver cores in the NFL, but it takes them out of the running for this year's class a little bit, and that is a bummer when you look at the talent on hand here. I could go on and on about my guy Jamar Chase, who won the Biletnikoff last year. Then you got the first wide receiver to win the Heisman Trophy, and Lord knows how long, in Devontae Smith. And oh, by the way, the guy who played the least amount of all of them, Jalen Waddle, might be the most freakishly talented. It's about as star-studded a top of the draft as I can think of. And not to bum Cowboy fans out, but rather than worry about the Cowboys drafting them, you probably need to worry about their division rivals doing it, because Philly's up there at number 6 overall, needing a wide receiver. Giants could probably use some weapons there at number 11 as well. I'm not going to be the least bit surprised if one or two of those guys wind up in the NFC East, but probably not with the Dallas Cowboys, and that's kind of scary.
If that ends up happening and either one or two of those top 3 receivers in this draft class ultimately end up going to the NFC East, what kind of challenge does that present to a secondary for the Cowboys that we know isn't necessarily the strength of the team?
An absolutely huge one. I mean, these guys win in all types of ways. I mean, Waddle and Smith, their route running is absolutely unbelievable. I mean, the way that these guys get open and create separation. And oh, by the way, again, you can talk about the transition to the NFL. These guys are doing it at Alabama, where they are going against first-round prospects every other week anyway. Jamar Chase, it's a classic, narrative here in this bizarre COVID-19 draft, because we haven't seen the guy play in a year. But just in case anybody forgot, he caught 20 touchdowns for the national championship LSU team of 2019. Again, bullied teams like Clemson, like Oklahoma, like Alabama. Victimized our boy Trayvon Diggs a couple times in that game against Alabama a couple years ago. These guys win down the field. They win intermediately. They create big plays. Even if New York and Philly haven't figured out their quarterback problems, these are the types of receivers that can make life difficult for you no matter what.
Wide receiver went from my favorite position to watch in terms of draft preparation to my least favorite, just because how scary it ends up being for Cowboys fans moving forward. Now, how deep is this draft class? Because we can talk about the big 3 from last year and this year, but the reality is this is a really, really deep draft top to bottom.
Like I said, it's kind of a bummer, Kyle, because, hey, you can always be wrong, right? Like, we didn't know CeeDee Lamb would be the Cowboys pick last year. Maybe they pick a receiver because the value's too good, but it's hard to imagine them spending a big pick on a receiver with Amari Cooper, CeeDee Lamb, Michael Gallup, and oh, by the way, Cedric Wilson and Noah Brown were recently brought back in free agency. So the full core is together at least for another year, which makes me think maybe a receiver's not in the cards, at least in the top 100 or so. And that's a bummer, because the list goes on and on. Yeah, like, we can talk about the big 3, but how about Kadarius Toney out of Florida? A guy that I really like a lot, Tylan Wallace out of Oklahoma State. Big downfield 50-50 ball guy. Rondell Moore, short guy, maybe my size, probably a little taller than me, but absolutely electric with the ball in his hands. Another Moore, Elijah Moore out of Ole Miss. Like, it goes on and on and on. Like, even in the 3rd, 4th round of the draft, teams should be able to find really, really quality wide receivers. I don't expect the Cowboys to do that, but the value might be so good that they take a chance on it anyway.
You can catch insight like that every week on the Draft Show. He's David Hellman, and, well, of course, the draft closing in on a month away. We'll talk to you soon about
We're getting there, man.
Some more of those positions that the Cowboys could be interested in. When we come back here on the Blitz, we'll wrap things up and get you ready for another week of a crazy Cowboys offseason right after this.
The Dallas Cowboys Blitz was brought to you by AT&T, the official 5G innovation partner of the Dallas Cowboys, and by the Dallas Cowboys Football Club. Tour AT&T Stadium, the home of the Dallas Cowboys. Tours are available daily. For details, visit attstadium.com/tours.
We're right at 5.5 weeks or so away from the NFL draft on April 29th, and some pro days to look for this week. How about this, Kyle? Alabama has so many prospects. They have 2 pro days, the 23rd and the 30th.
Yeah, come on back. We'll show you some more of our NFL-ready guys. And so I don't really know which one Patrick Surtain is going to be in, but hey, maybe the Cowboys interested in that. You look at Virginia Tech, there's Caleb Farley at that one, and then even Florida's got a couple guys to look for.
All right, that does it for the Blitz this week. We will see you again next week, and that's when I will officially tear up my bracket.